Chapter 19 of Bunyip Land. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Bunyip Land by George Manville Fenn. Chapter 19. How We're Besieged, and I Thought of Birnam Wood. I believe the doctor saved us from dangerous wounds, if not from death, for as he threw himself flat, half a dozen arrows struck the roof of our shelter and fell pattering down amongst us as we lay. "Here, quick, pass these forward," the doctor whispered, and we managed to get the blacks' loads between us and the enemy, making of the packages a sort of breastwork which sheltered us while we hauled forward some pieces of stone, arrow after arrow reaching this extempore parapet, or coming over it to strike the roof and fall back. The natives with us understood our plans at once and eagerly helped, pushing great pieces of stone up to us, so that in about a quarter of an hour we were well protected, and the question came uppermost in my mind whether it was not time to retaliate with a charge of shot upon the cowardly assailants who had attacked us when we were so peacefully engaged. We had time, too, now to look around us and lament that our force was so much weakened by the absence of Jimmy and Aroo, who had gone to fetch more water. "They will be killed," I said, and I saw Ti-hi smile, for he had evidently understood my meaning. He shook his head too, and tried to make me understand, as I found out afterwards, that Aroo would take care of himself. But we left off in a state of the greatest confusion. Being then well sheltered, we contrived loopholes to watch for our enemies, and Ti-hi pointed out to me the place from whence the arrows were shot every time the enemy could see a hand. The spot he pointed to as that in which our assailants lay was where a patch of thick growth flourished among some stones, about 50 yards along the rocky pass in the direction in which we had come, and as I was intently watching the place to make out some sign of the enemy, and feeling doubtful whether the black was right, I saw a slight movement and the glint of a flying arrow, which struck the face of the rock a few feet above my head, then fell by Jack Penny's hand. "Mind," I said as he picked it up, "perhaps it's poisoned." Ti-hi was eagerly watching my face, and as I spoke he caught the arrow from Jack's hand, placed it against his arm, then closed his eyes and pretended to be dead, but as quickly came to life again as several more arrows struck the rock and fell harmlessly among us. These he gathered together, all but one, whose point was broken by coming in contact with the rock, and that he threw away. After this he carefully strung the bow that he always, like his fellows, carried, and looked eagerly at the doctor, who was scanning the ground in front of us with his little double glass. "I don't like the looks of things, my lads," he said in a low voice, and his countenance was very serious as he spoke. "I intended for ours to be a peaceable mission, but it seems as if we are to be forced into war with 2 men absent." "Shall we have to shoot 'em?" said Jack Penny excitedly. "I hope not," said the doctor, "for I should be sorry to shed the blood of the lowest savage, but we must fight in defence of our lives. We cannot afford to give those up, come what may." Ti-hi fitted an arrow to the string of his short strong bow, and was about to draw it, but the doctor laid his hand upon him and checked him, to the savage warrior's great disgust. "No," said the doctor, "not until we are obliged, and then I shall try what a charge of small shot will do." We were not long in finding out that it was absolutely necessary to defend ourselves with vigour, for the arrows began to fall thickly enough, indeed, to show us that there were more marksmen hidden among the trees than the size of the clump seemed to indicate from where we crouched. I was watching the patch of trees very intently when I heard a sharply drawn inspiration of breath, and turning I saw the doctor pulling an arrow from the flannel tunic he wore. As doctors say, Joe," he whispered with a smile, 3 inches more to the right and that would have been fatal." I don't know how I looked, but I felt pale, and winced a little while the doctor took my hand. The force of habit made me snatch it away, for I thought he was going to feel my pulse. I fancied for the moment that it must be to see whether I was nervous, and the blood flushed to my cheeks now and made me look defiant. "Why, Joe, my lad, what is it?" he said quietly. "Won't you shake hands?" "Oh, yes!" I cried, placing mine in his, and he gave it a long firm grip. "I ought," he said after a pause, "to have said more about the troubles, like this one, which I might have known would arise when we arranged to start. But somehow I had a sort of hope that we might make a peaceful journey and not be called upon to shed blood. Joe, my lad, we shall have to fight for our lives." "And shoot down these people?" I said huskily. "If we do not, they will shoot us. Poor wretches, they probably do not know the power of our guns. We must give them the small shot first, and we may scare them off. Don't you fire, my lad. Leave it to me." I nodded my head, and then our attention was taken up by the arrows that kept flying in, with such good aim that if we had exposed ourselves in the least, the chances are that we should have been hit. The doctor was on one side of me, Jack Penny on the other, and my tall young friend, I noticed, had been laying some cartridges very methodically close to his hand, ready for action it seemed to me, but he had not spoken much, only looked very solemn as he lay upon his chest, kicking his legs up and sawing them slowly to and fro. "Are we going to have to fight, Joe Carstairs?" he whispered. "I'm afraid so," I replied. "Oh." That was all for a few minutes, during which time the arrows kept coming in and striking the roof as before, to fall there with a tinkling sound, and be collected carefully by Ti-hi and his companions, all of whom watched us with glowing eyes, waiting apparently for the order to be given when they might reply to the shots of the enemy. "I say, Joe Carstairs," said Jack, giving me a touch with his long arm. "Yes, what is it?" I said peevishly, for his question seemed to be a nuisance. "I don't look horribly frightened, do I?" "No," I said, "you look cool enough. Why?" "Because I feel in a horrid stew, just as I did when a lot of the black fellows carried me off. I was a little one then." "Were you ever a little one, Jack?" I said wonderingly. "Why, of course I was, a very little one. You don't suppose I was born with long legs like a colt, do you? The blacks came one day when father was away, and mother had gone to see after the cow, and after taking all the meal and bacon they went off, one of them tucking me under his arm, and I never made a sound. I was so frightened, for I was sure they were going to eat me. I feel something like I did then. But I say, Joe Carstairs, you're sure I don't show it?" "Sure, yes," I said quickly. "If we have to shoot at these savages, shall you take aim at them?" "All depends," said Jack coolly. "First of all I shall fire in front of their bows like the man o' war's men do. If that don't stop 'em I shall fire at their legs, and if that don't do any good then I shall let 'em have it right full on, for it'll be their own fault. That's my principle, Joe Carstairs. If a fellow lets me alone I never interfere with him, but if he begins at me I'm nasty. Here, you leave those arrows alone, and well, what's the matter with you?" This was to Gyp, who was whining uneasily as if he scented danger and wanted to run out. "Down, Gyp, down," said his master, and the dog crouched lower, growling though now as a fresh arrow flashed in from another part. The doctor started and raised his gun to take aim at the spot from whence this shot had come, for one of the savages had climbed up and reached a ledge above where we were. In fact, this man's attack made our position 10 times more perilous than it was before. But the doctor did not fire, for Ti-hi, without waiting for orders, drew an arrow to its head, the bowstring gave a loud twang, and the next instant we saw a savage bound from the ledge where he had hidden and run across the intervening space, club in one hand, bow in the other, yelling furiously